Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Still to this day, adjusted for inflation, the largest company in history was the Dutch East India Company, or VOC. They would be approximately $8 trillion present day value. They were so large, they not only had their own army, but also their own currency. Fast forward to today, and I, along with many of you, think it's possible Tesla might even eventually surpass the VOC. So would it not be too unthinkable? Tesla might eventually have their own currency too? Before you start thinking, oh no, here comes another video on Tesla's own crypto, I'll stop you there with a no. This is different. I think Tesla has the ability to make the best currency possible for transacting, as in what's known as a medium of exchange, rather than store of value. A currency which is immune to inflation, yet backed with an intrinsic value. Its simplicity makes perfect sense when I tell you the name of the currency. A watt-hour. That's right, everything could be priced and transacted in watt-hours. You can use 1 unit to power your house, a watt for an hour. You could use 1 unit to charge your car, an additional watt-hour. You could use it to travel in a robotaxi for a watt-hour. These are just 3 examples of a way for it to have intrinsic value, where you can convert it to a utility whenever you want. The way goods are exchanged has a huge impact on a nation's development. For example, the whole barter system made transacting business too difficult, and thus slows down commerce. However, bartering has pretty much been debunked now, as when you think about it, it just wouldn't really work. Even back in the time of the Incas, they would use cacao beans to trade. It was more for rounding things up rather than actual currency. For example, if you wanted to swap some apples for some meat, you would pay the difference in cacao beans to make the trade even. The better the medium of exchange, the more it facilitates commerce. For example, credit cards are incredibly convenient, but they add about 2% cost onto every transaction. Removing that alone would improve commerce. We often hear people talk about a gold-backed currency as it has intrinsic value, and you can therefore convert your money into valuable gold. However, the thing is, the majority of gold's value is that it acts as a great form of scarcity to store value. Its value in industry or jewelry is minimal compared to the value it holds as scarcity. You can't eat gold, you can't use it to keep you warm or transport you anywhere. It just looks pretty. Therefore, in reality, it's not quite as intrinsic as people make out. I mean, it's a very unique form of specie. It doesn't tarnish or rust, and it comes from outer space, and is created from a supernova when a star collapses. The element has been revered for millennia, from Aztecs, Incas, Egyptians, and Romans. And money used to be backed by gold and silver. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system was created. Part of that was the Marshall Plan. Europe was in dire state after the war and needed financial aid from the US. That's what the Marshall Plan was. It meant that all currencies were then going to be backed by the US dollar, because the US dollar was backed by gold. But the US got to hold all the gold in the likes of Fort Knox. The thing is, America started spending wildly in the Vietnam War and a mission to get people onto the moon. Other countries were starting to think this doesn't add up, and that America must have printed more dollars than they have gold. If I recall, it was countries like France and Japan that started converting their US dollars into actual gold, until eventually, in 1971, Nixon removed the US dollar from the gold standard, effectively stealing all the gold that was backed by the dollar, not just from American citizens, but nations that had dollar reserves as their currencies too. Their US dollars effectively were no longer convertible to gold. Although this was supposedly just temporary, we're still waiting. Thus, the US dollar became a fiat currency, and obviously it created massive inflation, but eventually adjusted into a currency that people trusted. But like all fiat currencies in history, it will eventually lose its purchasing power. Given that everything we purchase costs money due to labour and energy, it seems apt to price things by the energy they took to create, along with profits. For example, a loaf of bread could cost 10 watt-hours, and perhaps it took 3 watt-hours of energy to make and deliver, and cost 4 watt-hours of labour, and 3 watt-hours of profit. You could store your watt-hour currency in your car and home batteries, and use them like a digital wallet. There could also be battery storage farms where you can deposit your watt-hours, again for quick and easy transacting. Perhaps with Tesla's auto bidder, you could easily buy and sell energy you have into the grid, which would serve you somewhat like a bank account. But what about rich people? What if they have gigawatt hours of wealth? There aren't going to be enough batteries to store all the wealth. Along with other reasons too, the watt hour would not work as a store of value. Gold was good for storing wealth due to its scarcity. Every day, new energy is created, sure, and consumed as well, but the amount of energy storage in the world would be volatile, and therefore would not have the value of scarcity. In addition to that, batteries do not stay charged. Energy will slowly escape from them. So, like I said at the start, it would simply be for a medium of exchange, not store of value. At least for now. Perhaps within time, we could have solid-state batteries that are capable of storing large amounts of energy with minimal charge leaking. Bitcoin could still serve for storing wealth. Bitcoin is the greatest form of scarcity ever created, and a great way to store value, whereas watt hours would be great for transactional currency for day-to-day expenditure. It would all be very simple, and there would be just one exchange rate, watt hours to Bitcoin. Yes, I'm still an advocate for Bitcoin. In reality, the fact it's not green enough according to Elon, aside from it being an order of magnitude greener than the current monetary system, but surely with just a few $1 billion of solar and batteries to run Bitcoin would likely solve that issue, which Tesla could even supply. Remember, Tesla said they suspended purchases, implying it might just be temporary, and intend on using it when Bitcoin mining transitions to sustainable energy. But I don't know, like everyone else, I'm still trying to make sense of it all. But perhaps we can trust Elon. There is some comfort we can take with the ambitions he had with PayPal, again to decentralize finance and remove the banks. Watt hours wouldn't necessarily need to be controlled by Tesla either. It could be decentralized, if it's simply treated as a generic utility. It's just necessary that it is an accepted way to pay for power, and thus has its intrinsic value. But Tesla could start the intrinsic value by accepting it as a payment into their auto bidder and robotaxis. But in a sense, if anyone can generate some power into a battery that can be exchanged some way, then I don't think it would need to be centralized. It would be 100% fungible, as in a watt hour from my battery is just as good as a watt hour from your battery. So how is it created and transacted? I mean, you can't just carry around a big battery with you everywhere and pay for your groceries from that, and then try and transfer how many watt hours from your battery to the supermarket's battery. No, that wouldn't work. I think it would be more like a credit card or a charge card, probably used as an app on your phone. An energy storage farm would simply say that a watt hour has gone from my account to the supermarkets. And perhaps this is what banks would become, massive energy storage farms. But then you could equally use this card to charge your car's battery or home battery. The energy is deducted from your account and then fed into your home battery via the grid. You would have a bank account or energy account, I suppose. You could be paid by Tesla whenever you put energy into the grid, through your solar panels, for example. Tesla would load up your account with, say, 100 watt hours. You can then go and spend these with your app. Whether you're transferring money to a friend or purchasing something in a shop, your watt hours would then be transferred from your account to theirs. But at any time, you can use these watt hours back into the grid to power your house, charge your car, charge your Powerwall, or take a ride in a robotaxi. So there is where the intrinsic value lies, but then also accepted as payment at the supermarket or any other shop. It's also such a generic commodity that everyone always needs power or transport. Unlike gold, how often do you ever need some gold? It has very little actual intrinsic value, unlike how they say it does. You can't eat it, you can't transport it, it can't keep you warm, it just looks pretty, and it can be used in industry for various applications, but not as ubiquitously used as a watt hour. So everyone's solar panels will be making them watt hours all day, and they can either consume or use for spending, as in solar panels would essentially be the new equivalent of mining, or any other way to increase any production. It should of course only be allowed for renewable energy creation. This would then increase the level of creative destruction over renewable versus non-renewable, as renewable energy is literally money. This would certainly encourage more renewable energy, except not just from the energy industry, but perhaps from finance and banking too. And then what if we created too much energy? Would that then create inflation? Well, I don't think so, as it will always take the same amount of energy to manufacture anything. And if there was any energy abundance, it could be used to mine more Bitcoin, which demonstrates potentially how well they could work together. You can buy energy with Bitcoin, and you can convert the energy back by mining Bitcoin, and can thus be converted into a store of value. In a sense, Bitcoin is just that, a store of energy that has been used to mine. And Bitcoin would also be used as an accepted form of payment too, particularly for larger items like a Tesla, for example. I'm not entirely sure, but perhaps they could even be pegged together, like 1 Bitcoin equals a megawatt hour. I don't know if that would work. Then whenever you have too many watt hours of energy, you can convert them into Bitcoin. That would act like a savings account. But what about arbitrage, you say? You can just buy watt hours when they're cheap and use them to buy bread. Perhaps, but at the end of the day, it still takes the same energy to make the bread. In fact, it could mean that energy is allocated that much more efficient. Wall Street could change from a financial market to an energy market, about buying, selling, and storing energy to allocate energy the most efficiently around the economy. But this would likely require Bitcoin to not be pegged to the watt hour. And perhaps that is how it needs to function to be the most efficient. But we are in a new era. We've discovered digital currencies, which is a better version of what we use now. But it's a real chance to actually remove inflation and make it totally decentralized currency, devoid of any entity able to control it. By which I mean they cannot confiscate the currency, like Franklin D. Roosevelt did to everyone's gold in America. And it means no one can print or create anymore. With a watt hour, it simply can't be inflated. For example, why would it suddenly require more energy to bake some bread than previously? In fact, if anything, we would see deflation. New technologies making processes more efficient, requiring less energy. Perhaps in the future, we could bake a loaf of bread at 1 watt an hour less, thus making bread cheaper for everyone. In other words, everyone becomes a little wealthier as the cost of living is actually reducing, yet our time is just as valuable. Perhaps I'm way off, or perhaps I am onto something, and it requires a bit more thinking than simply a 10-minute YouTube video. But in my opinion, there is no better intrinsic source than energy. It's so generic in its utility. Eventually though, a currency becomes trusted, prices tend to stabilize. The fact it would be hard to store such a large amount of power, and that also the battery storage can't even hold energy forever as it loses charge over time, and the energy is created and consumed so regularly, it should all add to price stability, which is currently the main disadvantage of Bitcoin. Although that too would stabilize if it was a global-based currency. Anyway, I'm sure there may be some holes in some of these ideas, but perhaps they could be worked out. If it could be, it would serve as a great currency for exchange. And that's its purpose, to facilitate commerce. It doesn't need to be a storage of wealth. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe.